I'm not going to be able to get the intro because Izzy won't stop laughing. So.
Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to Safe From Home. Honestly, if you start, I can see you about to start in the corner. Basically, this is called Safe From Home, hosted by me, Nikita, where I interview my classmates studying fashion in their final year at Edinburgh College of Art, and joined by me is Izzy. Let's see how this is going to go today. So Izzy, do you want to introduce yourself, the name of your collection, and 3 to 5 words which you think sum up your collection, if you can get them out?
Hi, I'm Izzy, GUTIERREZ. My collection's called The Second Skin, and it's about hyperfeminism, female sexual identity, sustainability, and subverting the historical restrictions that women have been faced with.
Now you decide to be serious when it's your bit. Is that
Quiet, you can do your intro again.
No, okay, so do you want to talk us through The Second Skin?
Right, so basically my concept explores the female sexual identity and how our clothing can be used to empower and express our sexuality. I will go into detail about my sort of research when I get to the pages because they are better. In terms of like who the collection targets, it's really just any women who have a passion for bold colours and like statement wear, and women who want to express their empowerment and sexuality through their clothing and aren't afraid to do that, and to sort of redefine what they think of sexuality and how much skin they have to show or not show. It's all based on what they want. So I started researching basically the female gaze and the male gaze, and how like a lot of the time now we're seeing like films coming out and different books where it is so specifically about like the female experience, which is like obviously never really been a thing before. All films were from the male gaze, and I find these just like so interesting, and I wanted to create a collection that is essentially like the female gaze, and is what I felt and my friends who I spoke to felt would like encompass their experience.
That's really interesting, because usually when females are the protagonists in films, it's still sort of based around the man, in the sense that her whole journey through the film is, oh, I'm going to fall in love with a man. So even though she's the one who's meant to be the protagonist, actually he is the one that is almost surrounded by, or just the idea of having to find love, or that if you're in it, yeah, exactly. So I think this is so cool that you're doing it in this kind of way.
It's also like about the like, I don't know if you've seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
No, I haven't.
If you haven't, you should. It's a really beautiful French film, and essentially the way that all the shots in the film are created is through the female gaze, and that like what women find sexually attractive is very different to men, and most of the male gaze is to do with like legs and boobs and those sort of aspects of a woman, whereas women really like intimacy. So there's a lot of like close-ups on hands and like the clothing and eyes and eyelashes, and these are things that like inherently we wouldn't expect to be sexual, but for a woman that is what we find attractive and alluring, and it's really nice to see that focus in the film, and that sort of like ease created. It's really beautiful,
and it's also it's the fact that even as well, when a woman wants what she wants, so whether that might not be intimacy and whether it is just sex, is that, or if we want to be in an empowered position, then we're usually deemed as the bitch, or we can't have it all, which is frustrating.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, that was something I really wanted to put into my collection. I went to the important women in my life and sort of spoke to them about what they found sexy to wear, like what they felt comfortable in, and I had some like really interesting responses from that, and most of them was this sort of idea of freedom. They just wanted to be able to wear whatever they wanted, something that's like loose fitting but strong silhouettes, that made them feel empowered. And there was a big emphasis on lingerie, despite the fact that they like didn't necessarily want anyone to see it. It wasn't like they were wanting to get naked, but having that like attractive lingerie underneath their clothes made them feel powerful.
Yeah.
It was like a secret. It was Victoria's Secret.
Sponsored by. When I do wear whatever underwear I've chosen to wear, it's not because I'm wearing it for a male, because most of the time they're not going to see me in my underwear. It's because it makes me feel really sexy, it makes me feel attractive, and like, or if you want to wear like more comfy, baggy, it's because of how you're feeling inside. It's how you want to, even though no one can see it, but it's still some sort of form of self-expression. But from what you've said, I have a question for you. What does it mean to you to be a woman?
That is a big question.
It is.
What does it mean to me? I don't really think there is much that specifically makes me feel like a woman, apart from the fact that I can like reproduce. Like I've always been really inherently like a mummy, so that is where I think my womanhood lies. But I don't think that that's something that everyone feels. The rest of it is sort of just personhood, I guess. I'm just a person. But like obviously we live in a society where there are like constructs of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man, and like I definitely have played into those in my life. But yeah, I really like hyper femininity, like really oversized flowy silhouettes, and like I like how that jars with like these like bondage wear, like lingerie kind of looks. I really like fusing those together in like my personal style. Yeah, I think like just subverting that is really important to me, and like sort of reclaiming it as something that like I find attractive and it's not for anyone else. I mean, if I had my way, I would literally walk around in my pants like 24/7. But obviously that's not realistic because men are gross and they ruin that for me. But yeah, if men didn't exist,
I think we'd all be walking around naked, to be honest. But it is I think that's really important to highlight, that you're saying that, you know, society makes us fall into different categories more often than not. And even so, I used to do this podcast, and one of the questions that we put out there was, do you think women dress for themselves or men? And it was a poll, and the responses were from men and women, and almost all the women said that they were dressing for themselves, and the ones who said that they were dressing for others were mostly men. So men thought that women were mostly dressing for them. And it's just, you know, when I saw the responses, I was like, you know what, get a grip, because not everything is about you lot.
That is so funny. Get over yourself.
Literally.
No, nobody's dressing for you. If anything, I'm dressing for my friends because I want them to be like, wow, I like your top.
Yeah, like we, you know what, when we do girls' nights, we dress equally as, like, I literally, if not more.
I dress up more.
Yeah, exactly. So who am I trying to chase then? No one.
No, I love it. Anyway, so my collection, the idea of the second skin kind of like really came into its own when I was looking at the Selkies, which is Scottish folklore, of these like they're essentially mermaids, but they're seals. So they're like seals that could take off their skin and become beautiful women, and when they put the skin back on, they're seals again. And these like Selkie characters come up a lot in Scottish folklore, in stories where the men basically steal the Selkies' pelt, the fish skin. Yeah. So the women take the skin off, and then the men will steal and hide their skin and force them to marry them. And so the women will spend their entire lives essentially looking for their pelt, and wanting to go back to the sea, but because it's been taken away from them by these sailors, they can't do that. And it's pretty upsetting, and there's a lot of these sort of like cultural stories about this happening, because of these, they're so beautiful, the men just can't keep their eyes off them. And I wanted to like play on that idea of this like pelt, and the fact that like I think as a woman I am constantly like trying to feel comfortable in my own skin, and that is really hard being a woman, because every time I go outside I get catcalled, and that sounds really vain, but I genuinely think that happens to every girl. And yeah, so I wanted to reclaim that idea in the Second Skin and create a pelt for these women, like an outfit that made them feel more comfortable, that would reclaim their sexuality and their selfhood.
It's 100%. It's like a protective layer, because I agree with you there. It's definitely not a vanity thing. I think men often see women, and I don't know what goes through their brains. And I'm not saying all men, obviously, but for conversations like these, it's just easier to say men. I think also that, so I think a lot of women can remember, like myself definitely can remember, there are points when, you know, when you're younger, I didn't realize what was happening was bad, whether it was someone of my, like, even if it was a boy of my age. I genuinely didn't realize that you had a feeling in yourself, but you didn't know of like black and white, because at school well, hopefully they're introducing it more and more, but that we didn't get taught that, and that's something that we should have in PSHE. And and even like there's instances where I think a lot of us don't remember some of the things that happen, like you're saying, the catcalling, because it's so frequent that it's just something that happens, which is it shouldn't.
Now, like, there's one experience I had at a place that I worked. Really not that bad. It made me laugh at the time, because I was wearing like I was wearing my mum's like oversized baggy dress. No part of my body was exposed. And a man I worked with, who was like maybe like 15 years older, told me that he really liked what I was wearing. It was really sexy because it was so loose fitting, he could imagine what was going on underneath. And I just found it so funny, because I wasn't dressed sexually, and I was like, well, now you've ruined this for me too. Like, now I can't wear anything without being sexualized.
Oh my goodness. Also, do you know what? It's just the audacity to like let that come out of your mouth is.
I know.
Yeah.
What little 18-year-old me was like, what? It's just a dress.
Also, he was 15 years older. That's
So, yeah, he was like a grown man, grown ass man, and I was a little baby child in my mum's dress.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Selkies again, because there's a lot of things I can say on that, and I don't want to start talking about it.
Yeah, so let me move on. Anyway, the other thing that I've kind of like fused into my research is I was looking at prosthetics, and basically the same materials that were in like the original prosthetics, like whalebone, wood, cotton, were also used in corsets and corsetry for women. And I just found that really interesting, that like there was the same materials were used to aid people and help them in their lives, as these things that were like restricted for women, that women couldn't breathe in, and were used basically to force a body shape. And I kind of liked the idea of like playing with those materials and be like subverting them again and making them into this like new like armor for these women, for their skin. And so that's like where I found out I kind of knew what materials I wanted to use, and I wanted to take this like wood idea forward, and this sort of like armament, alternative armor.
There's a lot of readings and there's a lot of playwrights or whatnot that talk about why women at the time were wearing corsets, and it was often because they were seen, when they were in these restricted outfits by men, as it's not even about more desirable. They just thought they were intellectually superior when they were dressed in that way, and it was a way to show social class and your intellect and your morality. When how is that showing that someone is superior and more moral is beyond me? But I think that's a great way of repurposing, because often there's as women today, we can look back and be like, I can't believe all these things happen. But I think there's something amazing about finding a way to almost celebrate it, or, you know, flip the script on it, which I think is quite fun. Yeah,
exactly. The other thing, like in a similar sort of vein, in the 17th century, women would wear basically dresses that matched the curtains. Those like upholstery prints were really really common, and a woman was expected to dress to reflect her household, to show like the grandeur and the status of her home. And I wanted to take that on board with the idea of like curtains and upholstery and fuse that into my collection. The like over draping. As you'll see, I've been using like curtain tapes to create my like the volume and the drape in my silhouettes. Yeah, so going back to the like armor and the wood, this is just like my initial sort of like textile that I came up with. Basically, I've laser cut these little loops out of like sustainably sourced wood, making it biodegradable. And the idea is that you could take it all apart, essentially. You should be able to take all the wooden pieces off of the paper. So my three main materials are these little wooden loops. I'm using washable paper in 3 different colors, which is fully biodegradable. And my soft fabrics are all tensile, so they're made from plant-based fibers, and they're also biodegradable.
Wow, that's so unique. So are you going to be sticking with the natural color as well in your collection?
For the wood?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all the woods naturally is the natural color. I had experimented with dyeing it in different ways, in like sustainable ways, but I just didn't like it. I prefer how it looks naturally.
There is definitely a beauty when you can find ways of making something look like not what it is, but you don't just need to do it through color. So I think the fact that you've kept the color and it still doesn't look like wood itself, I think is really beautiful.
I was just trying to get like a really strong silhouette that's kind of like fusing like this sort of like cowboy carelessness, really fun, something I would wear to like, you know, a girls' night, but still comfortable and casual. And I wanted that to play out, and through the washable papers, almost looks like leather, like a nice suede, and I liked that. I thought it sort of brought that whole like bondage sexuality idea into my collection while still having sort of like carefree, the protective layer. This is one of my toiles without like any of the trimmings on it. But all of this is in washable paper, all being in, and it's like got pin tucks at the back. And I was making my own, like all of my finishings are laser cut. But yeah, so I basically made like this corset out of the washable paper, and then it's got this long tensile skirt. It's got a little cut through here, and all of the paper where it's like on the bodice where it's sewn together. Just like, this is the bodice that I've been working on. Right, so it's like,
oh, that's so cool. Is that by hand?
No, I used the machine. I discovered a feature. One good thing about working from home is that I read the manual for my sewing machine.
Yeah, I think it looks so beautiful.
So this is technique I've used like throughout the collection. I basically took the like laser cut loops, and then I've woven them with fabric. And these are like the straps for a lot of my collection.
Are you going to be using that technique for belts and straps?
This is on all of my belts, on my coat, as you'll see in a minute. I'll just bring it up. On all of the detailing, and my fourth look is a lot of it, as you'll see in a minute. I just wanted to show you like an up close version of how this looks. Really cool. I really like doing it. It's really fun. I learned how to do it. Just credit to the girl who taught me at a Fashion Revolution event. There was a girl who was making jewelry, and she showed us how to do this technique. She didn't have a name for it. I think she made it up. She's the best. I couldn't find her socials or her on anything.
What's her name?
But yeah, she taught me how to do this. I don't know.
You don't even know her name.
I don't know anything about her. But she taught me how to do this, and I liked it. And I learned this like 5 years ago, and I've just like held on to it because I thought it was a really cool thing to do.
Another thing, you know, on the loops that you've got, I love that it's got the darker, I guess that's the burning from the laser.
Yes,
that's why, yeah, I think it would have been a shame to even dye them, because that looks so beautiful and expensive, having that feature. It looks great.
I did dye. I dyed them in a million different ways, but they just didn't sing to me. So this is sort of the look, the general look. It's developed a lot from this point, but you know, it's got the bones of what the look is supposed to be like. and washable paper. It's got a washable paper hat. The hat is inspired. I skipped past it earlier, but I did research on like the Handmaid's Tale and these sort of like horse blinkers. An article in a 1955 Housekeeping Monthly.
Oh, are you subscribed?
Yeah, we go way back. No, it's just very famous because of what was written in it. Basically, like, it's just a list of things that a woman should be doing in 1955 to be a good wife, to be a good housewife. And one of the things was, don't greet him with complaints and problems. Don't complain. Listen to him. Prepare yourself. And it is really interesting, just the attitudes to what was being put out to women, of how they should behave. And that's something I wanted to bring through with my accessories, and the idea of like these blinkers and like the control, not being able to see what you're doing. And I wanted to bring that forward in sort of like a funky way that could maybe like subvert that. I liked the idea of like using that sort of bucket hat silhouette, and like I think if it's coming from a woman and you're reclaiming it, then it's pretty empowering, you know. Like, I think they're really beautiful silhouettes, but what's behind them isn't so great.
Like I said before, reclaiming how men have deemed us in the past and using that as almost a power to, or almost like a middle finger to be like, actually, this is how we view ourselves, and we're not going to listen to what you said in the past. And I am from the Indian diaspora, and in my community, it's still really rife today that that's the attitudes towards women. And so I'm quite an outspoken person, and I know that sometimes could cause problems, or maybe sometimes the way Indian men might perceive me might be, I guess sometimes they feel like a woman should be put in her place, and I wouldn't be the type of person to be like that. And obviously watching the way my grandmother has been talked to by men, and my mum was in India recently, and she was even saying the way men talk, and because my mum's quite similar to me in the sense that she's really, well, I'm similar to her actually, but the way she's really outspoken, she goes, it really does, it's almost like being in somewhere that's so forward and futuristic in so many vehicles, but then so backwards when it regards women. And yeah, I think there is a massive power and beauty in reclaiming that back. I definitely think that's so powerful. And that's why I think it's so important as well when you're talking about your collection, to be able to, it's not just about the visual, but be able to give you a voice to say why that's inspired you and why you think that's beautiful. So I definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a development of my final look. For my final look, it's I was really hoping to do something like a little bit more avant-garde, something that's kind of like more in your face, and this is like quite heavily influenced by the upholstery curtain research I was doing, as well as it just being a nice dress. This is what I have been working on.
Oh, Izzy, that is beautiful.
Thank you.
It's really cool how you managed to mimic the oval weaving technique, and then mimic that with, is that pleat, that you've pleated obviously the fabric, haven't you?
Yeah, well actually it's curtain tape. First look, the third look, and the fourth look are in this lineup, are the ones I'll actually be making. I haven't illustrated my final fourth look yet because I haven't decided where it's 100% where it's going. I think that's like, I do tend to work quite like down to the wire. I don't like, I'm very like drapey, so I like to put things on the mannequin and then draw them afterwards. I can't draw and then make the drawing, which I know a lot of people can do. I have to like see, I can't think 3D, basically. I have to see it and then put it onto 2D.
So do you start with a quick sketch and then go on the mannequin, or do you, or you like, no, not at all, I'm gonna go straight on the mannequin then do my sketching? That's really interesting actually.
I just can't picture things 3D unless I've like seen them to some extent. I mean, I could physically draw and then make it, but I just don't think they look the same, like the same quality.
Also, I feel like when you draw something, you can't control the way a fabric falls when you're doing it in person. Like, it never looks the same. So, and I definitely learned this, that for example with one of my looks, so I drew it and it looks good in the drawing, but then doing it in reality didn't work. And then I was like, okay, no, draw on the stand. So drawing on the stand would be actually doing on the stand, then drawing and going back and forth. And that, I actually think it works for everyone differently, I guess. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your collection. So I think you can tell I love your concept because I had maybe a bit too much to say. But obviously we have to think of our concepts over the summer. Was this something that you knew you wanted to talk about, or was there something that inspired you in particular? How did it kind of come about for you?
Yeah, no, it wasn't at all I wanted to do my collection on. I really wanted to do it on mental health. Like from the beginning, I was like, it's going to be about mental health. It's going to be about OCD. But then I decided that, honestly, I just got like taken away with this like Selkie idea of having like heard some of the folklores from one of my friends who's Scottish. And I just was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do about. That's really interesting. I'm excited about that. Like feminism for me is something that I feel like I've explored a lot within like writing and other art projects like over my sort of like experience. But one of the facets I wanted to explore more was sexuality, because I'm not really like, there's not really spoken about that much. And I'm quite a sexual person. I talk about sex a lot. I don't mind. I have friends who want to talk about sex a lot, but it's like taboo. And I feel like I still get some people come into my friendship group and they're like, oh, you talk about sex a lot. I'm like, yeah, because everyone's doing it a lot. Like it's an important part of life. I don't understand when people don't talk about it, or when people get freaked out about talking about like the gender orgasm gap and the fact that like 90% of women fake orgasms and aren't just ready to like talk about this like sexual side of themselves. I just think it's really important, and that's what I wanted to bring across. And in terms of like the bondage wear aspects of my collection and like the Handmaid's Tale kind of blinker style, I wanted to explore sort of these like conventions of restriction and how women can like enjoy that. You know, like I like the look of those hats. I know that they're restricting, but it's in the same way as like there are some facets of sexual experiences that women are told you're not allowed to like, because you can't be a feminist if you're into that. Like, you know, you don't want to be tied up to have sex because that's detrimental to a woman. But like, it's not. It's something we're allowed to enjoy, also, and we're allowed to talk.
Yeah, if I've chosen that that's what I want to explore, I want to do, that's powerful in itself, that I'm deciding to do that. And to be a feminist and to be a woman, the reason why I asked you at the beginning what a woman means to you is because there isn't an answer. There isn't one, or there shouldn't be one answer, because for me it's just a multifaceted being. And you can be a homemaker, or you can be someone who wants to go and work, and you can be both, or you can be maternal. You don't have to. It's like there's so many definitions of a woman that there shouldn't actually be one. And for some reason there is. And like what you were saying is that I'm quite similar in the sense that I make a lot of sexual jokes, and my friendship group's quite like that. We're quite rowdy girls in that sense, and I'll make jokes about that all the time. And again, being Indian, when it's within my community, even my age range, I'm not saying all I do, like it's making a joke about it and being able to talk about it. And I speak quite freely about it, just because why should it be? There's actually a podcast called Brown Girls Do It Too. And in our society, the way men treat women is like we're a commodity often, and that's because sex hasn't been taught, or it hasn't been taught that sex is something that's pleasurable rather than something that just has to happen. And I think there's a power in women being able to talk about sex, being able to talk about, oh, I faked an orgasm, or being able to talk about a silly story that might have happened, just as a man would do it. And so
I mean, not to get too deep, but I had this concept in my head for a long time about like just telling us all about sex, about maintenance sex, about like if you're in a relationship, like an important person told me basically if you're not having sex with him, someone else is, and the idea of like maintenance sex, I was like, oh, okay, I have to do this. It's my job. If I want to be with this person, I have to be a sexual entity for them. And it took me like a long time and like a lot of like unpacking that to sort of realize that that isn't a thing. You should only ever want to have sex because you want to have sex, not because you need to maintain a relationship. And like these taboo things, I just wish they had been talked about more when I was younger. Like I would always, speaking to a young person, want to communicate these things because you don't have to. I've always had such a complicated relationship with my sexuality and like what it meant to be a woman and like my value beyond being a sexual object. But I didn't really think I had one for a long time. I thought it was just like, I'm here to be sexy. That's the only thing I have to offer. And like, I really wish people were like older women had told me about like that's not reality.
Yeah.
Sex means very little, and in that way, it should just be very openly spoken about. And like, so should what I wear and what I do. It shouldn't be that taboo.
Well, I think it's definitely a generational thing, and by us having, well, I'd say that, but then there's also a lot of girls who look down on other girls who talk about it. So it's a strange cycle, but the more we talk about it, for example, and the more we know we would want to talk to our children about it if we want to have children or younger people, then I think that's important, that it is a conversation to be had. And if someone doesn't want to have that conversation, they don't. And if someone does, then you shouldn't judge a woman for wanting to speak about sex or wanting to make jokes about it, because we've all got sexual body parts, and so we should all be able to speak about it. I don't see what the issue is. So that's a really interesting thing that you said you wanted to do it on mental health. And I think obviously this isn't completely directed at mental health, this collection, but I think there's something to be said that the fact that you're empowering women or making garments that do empower women, it does affect their mental health in a positive way, because there's a lot of people who suffer from mental health due to, you know, their sexuality or due to relationships where they've been made to feel a certain type of way, or sexual violence. There's so many factors that can make someone have suffer from mental health. And I think, you know, it's the idea of doing what you know. And I always think, you know, I've suffered from mental health illnesses and people close to me have. And I think if you want to touch on why that's important to you, there is a power in doing what you know, and that obviously has given you a fire in your belly to push to do this collection based on female empowerment, but it's linked to mental health, so I don't think you've had to give up one for the other.
Well, I think I didn't realize how much it was like the whole experience of this collection was really cathartic. I feel like I've been able to like unpack a lot of my own like emotions towards sexuality. And like actually one of your friends, Lucy, recommended a book that she was writing her dissertation on called My Dark Vanessa.
Yeah.
And I got into it without trigger warning, wasn't ready. Took me into like a place I wasn't expecting to go. Mm-hmm. And I think I just started unpacking a lot of like sexual like emotions towards like youth and sexuality and like hyperfeminism and like this whole like Lolita complex of like infantilism and like young girls. And that was something I also wanted to like, look at in my collection, like the idea of like almost the same as like the women dressing like the curtains, like this like doll complex, like wanting to be this perfect thing that's small and weak and vulnerable. And I like that. Like I mean, obviously I don't like that stuff, but I like ruffles and long dresses and girly things. I'm just very feminine. But yeah, I wanted to like create a version of that which could be empowering for a lot of people who aren't necessarily into all of the super feminine stuff, that was still strong. And like I think that's where the wood kind of comes in, and like the like restricting sort of elements of my designs.
Yeah, I like that there is that kind of dynamic versatility between the two, because me personally, well, you see how I dress most of the time, and it's not always hyper feminine, or I don't always go for more floral stuff. But when I have worn more flowy clothing, I felt quite beautiful. Or I tend to wear baggy, oversized stuff some days, and some days I'll go tight. So the fact that you've got both, it shows that you don't have to have one particular fashion taste. You can be a bit of everything and kind of mishmash it together, and it goes, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think that's really important to explore. And like, I don't know, I just hope that my collection like inspires people. That sounds so cocky. I just hope that my collection's going to inspire people. I mean, you know, if someone was to wear it, I would hope that they would feel comfortable and still attractive and beautiful for themselves, and not for anyone else.
Do you know what? There's a difference between cockiness and arrogance and confidence. And it's so fine to be like, I hope I inspire people, because the people that are buying into your brand are buying into you and who you are as a person and your beliefs. So actually you would be inspiring them, or they wouldn't go and wear it. And I think it's obviously, I know what you mean. It is sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to say it, but and you feel a type of way, but being confident in what you want people to feel, I think that's so fine. So we've spoken a lot about sexuality and what inspired your collection. So I feel like it's probably going to be a similar thing that we've discussed, but what do you think you've learned about yourself as an individual and yourself as an actual designer?
Actually, this is what I've learned. I am great at working at home. Like, I live for it. I am not as like, I'm a social person, but working around other people gives me like the heebie-jeebies. I hated it. Like, I wouldn't go to school when uni was open. I like having more, obviously, like, it's not ideal. I haven't got the like resources and space, not the best, but not having to work in a situation where I'm like feel like constantly on top of everyone, and like people are looking at my work, which they're not. I just have anxiety, so I had the like, I thought that people, I don't know, I just felt a bit claustrophobic around a lot of people. So I do quite well in my own space, and I think it's really like solidified the idea that I definitely want to be my own boss, start my own sort of brand, or work within a smaller brand, because I just thrive more on that kind of like chaotic independence. I am a little bit all over the place, and I don't really like to follow other people's directions. I never have since I was little, so I think that's kind of come out that I actually can do it by myself. I think I've always been a bit like terrified that I needed to work within a system and like be an employee under like somebody else's brand. But I think, you know, I feel more confident that I can just like believe in my own ideas and like go for it.
I think that's a really positive part of lockdown, actually, and working from home, is it has given us all, like you said, that self-belief to realize we can do it on our own without the tutors there at our beck and call. And although it has, of course it's been difficult, and there's things that we wouldn't have to do, like you said, resources, we don't have access to all of them. But I agree in the sense that when it comes to being at home, it's made us feel independent. I felt more of an I know I'm older now, but I felt more of an adult now than I have before, if that makes sense, by working from home. So, and like you said, even the prospect when we've started uni and when we were younger and thought of being a fashion designer, I think most students and most people would just automatically think of the big brands and think, oh, this is what I have to do and this is my dream. But that's only because that's what's been fed to us. But working from home and you saying, oh, this has made me think, oh, I could work for myself, or I could join a company where it's more of a smaller business and an independent brand. I think that's exciting, because your voice isn't heard as much in a bigger company, whereas working from home and having that independence, and if you are the type of person like Izzy or myself who kind of likes to govern their own path, then that's an avenue you could go down. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just we're fed that that's the be all and end all when it's not.
Yeah, well, it's safe, I guess. It's easy, but it's
Yeah.
hard to get into anyway. I mean, my dad has always said to me that like it's just as hard to get into the fashion industry as it is to make your own space in the fashion industry. Like it's gonna be difficult either way. So
My dad, he says almost every day, it's very hard to get into fashion. It's very, I'm like, I know, but it's a bit late now, isn't it?
Every single day.
My mum will be like, don't listen to him, you can do it. I'll be like, thanks. But it's so hard. Yeah.
It is hard.
So obviously that's been a positive aspect of working from home. So you've kind of answered a few questions in one there, but were there any difficulties working from home and any other things that you thought were positive?
Difficulties, yeah, like not having the resources is really difficult. I haven't tackled how I'm going to sew my entire collection via like my little sewing machine, because I'm using washable paper. It's light leather, it's hard to get through a domestic machine. Putting that aside, there's no, like, domestic machines have about this much space for the material to go through. So when you're sewing like leather, even if the needle goes through, the excess fabric has nowhere to live. So like it's very difficult. I don't know how I'm tackling that yet. Let's pray for me.
As a designer, what do you think's the most important thing for you as a designer? Not just this collection, but future collections, past collections. What is your
probably sustainability, which I've not really talked about that much, but I think it's really important that all designers coming into the industry have some sort of grasp on sustainability. Is a big, broad word, doesn't really mean anything, but ethically aware design and making less waste, I think it's really important, and something that I will take forward into my own independent brand in the future. We only have one planet.
Yeah. All right, Sandberg. It's true. It's definitely, I think it's definitely, you're right. Sustainability is a word that's just thrown out a lot of times to get sales. So it's called greenwashing, but it depends on your process to be sustainable, just as long as you're being transparent. But you've definitely gone all the way almost in terms of being sustainable. So in terms of your fabric choices and your pattern cutting, reducing less waste. And so would you say you'd retail in the luxury market, because also being a sustainable brand isn't always the cheapest?
In terms of the future,
yeah,
I wouldn't like to be making clothes that are unattainable for me if I wanted to buy the clothes, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like, I want to be, selling things that are well made, that you buy something to last. Obviously it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but I don't think it's unreasonable to be paying upwards of like £200 for a coat that is going to last. And I think that's really important. We don't need to have 50 million different coats. One's fine. Just pick one that's durable and that's going to last you a long time. That can be something that I've always loved in haute couture how you could, while the designer was alive who'd made the item of clothing, you can take it back and get it resized as many times as you want.
Macintosh do that as well, don't they?
And Macintosh do it too. And you can get it resized, you can get it fixed, and I think that's such a beautiful way of making something so much more long lasting and beautiful. And like the idea of like passing something down to a child, and I know that that's not super realistic with maybe a coat, but that is something that happens in haute couture. You pass these items down if they're really special, and you can have them resized, and I think that's so nice. And like the longevity in that is something that's really important in sustainability. But for this specific collection, everything is quite handmade. It's not super reproducible in terms of like it's quite difficult to make. It's not something that can be mass produced. So it would be retailing at a slightly higher price point, but that's not something I would necessarily want to take forward into my own brand.
I guess it's our graduate collection, isn't it? So you want to go big or go home.
I don't know how many times I'm going to have to do like really crazy
Exactly. You only get this time once. But I think one of the key words that you said was longevity, because I think you can make as many sustainable garments as you want, but if no one wants to buy them, you've just made a whole collection of sustainable clothes that are going to have to be wasted because
Yeah.
it's not something that a lot of people want. And also, like you said, when you're doing a collection, you don't have to do loads of coats. You can do a couple of coats in your collection, or even one. You can, reduce the amount of garments. And also the fact that you've done something which is quite versatile is important in itself, because it means it appeals to a wider demographic, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And things like made to order clothing is really good. It's really important to keep numbers down, and like reduce the wastage. I mean, my collection, I've tried to be as sustainable as possible, even in terms of like all of my materials. I try to get them recycled, the recycled paper. I think that's really important. But obviously, we're students, and the world is not quite there yet. So, for example, my main material is washable paper, but I get it from Poland, and the CO2 emissions on transport for something like that to the UK is hard, it's difficult, it's expensive, and not good for the environment. But I can't get it anywhere else, and it's my graduate collection. This is something that perhaps if it becomes more fashionable for people to be using these materials, then it will be something that could be made in the UK. Because it's the hypocrisy is the material was made in Italy.
It is. And obviously, well, my friend Lucy that you spoke about before, so she said we were having a conversation, and she said, I find it really frustrating when people have these views and then they try and push them on you. And she said there are some things that we can't all agree on, or we don't all support, and we don't all have to support them. But when it comes to certain things, for example, sustainability being one of them, it's in all of our interest to support it, I think. And that's what she was saying. She was like, there are some things that we should all support and are in everyone's interest because it affects us and the whole planet. But then there are some things which, might not affect everyone, and someone might not all be interested in. And like you were saying with sustainability, there is a slight hypocrisy, but it's so hard to do it all. So it's about trying to start, like what you're doing is starting from somewhere. And
exactly.
And you can't, and also with students, it's very hard to financially support yourself doing all of the things that we would like to do in that time space. It's not always realistic, but when we are hopefully designers, then that is something that you could tackle or introduce.
I mean, it's one of those things that I get in this argument quite a lot with people who are about talking about sustainability and how like it is just hypocritical doing fashion and at all, because I mean realistically, yes, me not being in the fashion industry is saving more CO2 and material than me being in the fashion industry and making clothes. But I mean, I hope that at some point I make a big enough impact that things actually like change, and I really try not to be wasteful. And I think that these young emerging designers who have these sort of opinions of not being wasteful are the next generation. Hopefully we're going to take over from these big corporate brands that are peddling this fast fashion, mass production and waste. So I guess in a way it is important. Yes, maybe right now we're not quite successful, but we will be at some point.
Wrapping up. So speaking of learning from us, is there anything you would say to younger students or other students out there? Any pieces of advice you could give?
Yes, I have advice. I would say when things open up and it's not like coronavirus central, I would say really get into the university, like every opportunity to go and get like an induction into a workshop. Like I learned metalwork, I know how to weld now. And I did that. I wanted to do like metalwork for this collection, but obviously the universities are shut. And luckily I knew how to laser cut. But these things are like that the opportunities are there to like learn these skills. You could learn pretty much anything, you just have to go out and do it. And I think even though maybe they don't think it's going to link to your course, it's really important to learn these skills because it might, and you can create something quite exciting. That's my advice.
I completely back what Izzy's just said, because I signed up to a few workshops and went to them and wouldn't use them again, or it didn't apply to me at the time. But it's just the idea of, I've tried it and it could work, or I've tried it and okay, this doesn't work for me, and you can cross that off. But then you can always introduce that later on in your life. And also, actually, one of our tutors once said to us, for example, when it comes to pattern cutting, it's really important that we do, whether we're good at it or not, or that's our stronger area or not, it's good to know, because when you're designing as a designer, and then you have the pattern cutters and dressmakers, and you show them the technicals, and you show them all these ideas that you want to do, they will, it has to work for them. Like, you have to know what you're talking about. So in the same sense that if you would want to use someone who does wood or whatever, or use a welder, that it would be nice to kind of know something slightly about it, or know how it works and whether it would work. Because when we think of doing things, and in our head or on a sketch that looks great, but in reality it actually doesn't work. So I think I completely agree with what you've said.
Oh my god, the amount of times I'd go to the jewelry department with something and be like, I want to make this and it needs to be shiny, and he'd just be like, what? You want to what? I'd be like, please show me how to do it.
I do feel like a dipstick when I go and ask questions in some of the departments, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but hopefully they can do it.
So stupid, but you learn. And now I know things, so do that, learn things.
So Izzy, do you have any socials or any accounts where you can plug yourself, or anything that you're thinking of doing over summer that people can look out for?
So I have an Instagram account. It is are you going to put it on the screen? Is that helpful?
Oh yeah, I'll put the link in the description below.
I have an Instagram, Izzy Beauty Designs, and that is essentially my only social, unless you want to follow my personal account, which you definitely don't.
I follow. I've got the best of both, to be fair. She's got some lovely, I was actually looking at your socials yesterday because I was like trying to prepare for this, and then I was on your personal account, and it's got some lovely raucous shots on there.
Oh yeah, some great pictures up there, really empowering. Maybe don't do that. Great. I have a website too. The link to my social is my website and my Instagram account are in the description.
Yeah. Also, I would highly recommend anyone who wants to build a website in the creative industry to look at Izzy's, because your logo and the layout, everything's really, really, it looks so thought through.
My website is for artwork, digital artwork that I do. That I sell prints. It's not to do with fashion, although it might be at some point when I rebrand. But yeah, I really like that, which Nikita does too, because she did all this beautiful logos for the Sew From Home brand and for herself, and every other bloody project you've got going on, because you do so much that it gives me the fear. Stop doing things.
I actually thank you. Thanks, Izzy.
Anyway, I use Squarespace, so if they want to sponsor me.
All right, well, we'll wrap up now. So thank you so much for coming on. You've been an absolute delight. We've actually been talking for a very, very long time. So
editing this down.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's been amazing to have you on. And Izzy will be back for another episode in probably like a month and a half so time, just to show you how she's got on with her collection. I'm actually really, really excited to see your dress where you've used the wooden, I keep doing the shape. What's it called?
Loop.
Okay, loop. Yeah, where you've used the loop. Yeah, I don't know. I kept doing this. I was like, what shall I call them? But where you've used your wooden loops, and I'm excited to see how you're going to sew the pieces together, actually. Something to look forward to. So yeah,
I'm excited for your collection.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. Thank you to everyone who's watched, and like, subscribe, all that good stuff. So yeah, thank you.